Everybody, this is going to be the tutorial for how to create a sprite sheet with 3D models. So you can see I've got mine here that what I've created for the Cisne character in the Before Crisis game. Let's zoom in a little bit just so I can show you exactly what I'm talking about. So this is quite clearly not something I drew. There's no way I could make it. I've actually screenshotted a picture of the model, gone through each animation frame, and taken a picture of it. So how do we do that? So first, you need to set up your sprite sheet. I've got about 8 frames per animation. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is her running down animation. Now these animations over here, I know it's in the same row, but these are actually separate. It's just how I chose to make the sheet. You can really put them in. So if we take a quick look, I'm at somewhere around 1100 pixels by probably about 140. So each box is about 140 pixels wide by 140 pixels tall. Now, how can you set that? Like, you can't just eyeball this, obviously. What you want to do is in Photoshop, go to View, Rulers. Now, from these rulers, you can actually pull down a line and establish where you want the end of each frame to be, where each frame of the sprite, how tall it can be. But I've already done that. So we'll go to View Extras, and you can see I've already set these up. So if we zoom in a little bit again, just to get a little more precise, you can see this blue line here is right at 140 pixels. And this box is going to go to 140. So you can see this blue line is actually dead center at 70. So it's halfway. So this way the sprite is actually centered. So every single frame is going to be 140 pixels by 140 pixels. You can set it at 70 pixels. You can set it at 200, 400, 500, whatever abstract number you want. That's how big your frame can be. 140 actually I found out is kind of small. I need to probably make these more like 200 by 200, and we'll do that at a later date for this game in particular. Now, as far as making these, let's go over that. So if we go to Chimera, let's open up a model. So here I've started to create an avalanche model for the game. So let's open him up. There he is in all its glory, right? However, we can tell he is clearly a lot bigger than this. The size is way off. And you can see even here, this is zoomed in at 200%. So let's zoom out to 100. That's how big I need this sprite to be. I want all the characters to look roughly the same size, right? So unfortunately, Chimera doesn't make that terribly easy. What I try to do is find an upright animation. So I can go into these animations over here and find one that's standing. So this would be a bad one, right? Let's go to this one because it's close enough. If it's within a few pixels, no one's going to notice. Now, when it's 10 pixels larger, you'll start to notice that kind of thing when the 10 pixel person is standing next to the 20 pixel person. So anyways, how do we get the size? Well, I've actually got a ruler, and I have to right click and drag the mouse until this guy gets to be about the same size as the other ones. Now, what I've got Cisne at is about 3.5 centimeters. So that puts him at about that height. He'll be about the exact same size. So now what? Just a quick interjection. I forgot something, so this is going to be a little bit of a jump cut here. So we've got his size set, right? But we need him to be facing the right way. We need the angle of the model to look similar, because if we got this guy and he's angled like this, that's just not even close. So in order to set an angle that's consistent across all sprites, we're going to click Show Ground right there. So this guy is actually kind of off-centered. It's turned a little too much. So we'll use these lines, line him up. What I've done for all these characters is I get this straight, so right there. We're going to bring it down a little bit. So we want this horizon. I usually set it right in the middle, give or take, on this X resize line. So you can see it just cuts straight across the screen. Now we get rid of the show ground, and this is where we would then hit print screen. Now if we then wanted his left side, rotate the screen, get the lines lined up again. Go. Now the horizon doesn't matter that much. You're really not going to notice that much of a difference. But let's look at him at the angle we've got now, that compared to that, compared to that, it's a lot different. So to have it either like here, you can see the horizons right there, or up here, this little bit of wiggle room is not going to make much of a difference. So as long as it's close, as long as this is mostly straight and you can consistently do it, it'll look good. Now back to the regular recording. Well, we hit print screen. So I've now made a picture of my screen. Go back into Photoshop, hit Control N for new, and it's going to give me the size of my display. So I've got two monitors side by side, which is why the width is so big. We got our new size, hit Control V, and there's my guy right there. So we'll highlight him. Control C to copy him again, and we do want to go Control N, and this will give me a new tab with the size that I just copied. Click OK, hit Control V, there's my guy. Let's zoom in a little bit just so we can see him a little better. Very pixely, but it works for our game. Now we want to click on the magic wand. Make sure your tolerance is about 15 or so. You want to make sure you're on point sample instead of 3x3 average. However, Chimera, this purple background, all one color. So really this could even go to 1 or less and it would be okay. You want to click anti-alias. It may not matter if it's on. And you want to make sure contiguous is off, because if you've got an issue where, say, his 2 feet are together but there's purple in here, you want it to be selected. So you got a magic wand. Click in here and just hit delete. The purple background is now gone. However, we're still in a white background. That's not going to look good if a big white background is scrolling across the screen in the game. So go over here to your layers, right click on background, and delete. There we go. Now, we can hit Control-Shift-I. That'll invert our selection. So we're no longer selecting this transparency, we're selecting the actual model. Control-C to copy him. Now let's go over to our sprite sheet. Now first, let me turn off all these layers, just so it's not too confusing. And we can see a little bit better what we're trying to accomplish here. Okay. Turn this bar on too, just for later. We'll go ahead and move this up as well. I think I just adjusted this blue line, so we'd have to come back and fix that. But for this tutorial, it's fine. So we've got a little black line there. We'll just put it there for now. So, Control V, paste the guy I just copied. Let's zoom in a little bit because these sprites are kind of small. Now, let's just pretend that he is our Cisne character. So I've got her running down, and now maybe I want her to run left. Maybe let's say this is the first frame of her running left pose. So let's grab it, and we want it centered, so we're going to put him right about center. But how are you going to know if he's centered? Well, let's pretend that this is frame 2. What you have to do is, with these blue lines on, and we can actually turn off these rulers. With the blue lines on, we have to kind of guesstimate where his midsection is. So you can see, let's pretend this is the middle, right here. This guy is dead center where we want him. We'll go to move, and we need to find a reference point. So it could be his little satchel here. But if he's twisting his animation, that's not going to be great. What would probably be better is to use some point in his foot or his head, because generally the animations, their heads stay fairly still. So we will use his head. Let's first move him left, and just left and right click left. So at the very, very back of his hat, this little pixel here is now centered. It's right on our blue line, which we know is the center of the cell. So move him right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're just eyeballing it. So from the back of his hat, we move him right 5 pixels. Now we want to do the same thing with this guy. Select him. Make sure the back of his hat is lined up with that blue line. Right there. It is. And we want to move him 5 pixels. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now it's going to look different. So you can see if we say we had used his leg, or well, he looks pretty centered because it's the same picture. However, as they're moving, you'll notice that the things kind of move around. But using like the neck and like mid-body is a good way to get close. As you finalize the sprite sheet and you actually watch it in motion, that's where you can start to tweak things and find out what works best. Okay, so left to right, our animation is centered. So these two will flow perfectly. but he's going to hover off the ground because this is the bottom of the cell right here. So we've already selected this one. Let's just move him on down. Very bottom. So the very last little bit of his color, right there, that little bit of gray at the bottom of his boot is touching. Now you don't always want them on the bottom of the cell because there may be a point in the animation later where the character might step down. So you'll have to look at all of your animations first. You'll have to make sure you do animation 1, 2, 3, 4. You need to get all of them in there, and that's when you can start to fine tune what looks the most centered for this animation. So we'll just say his needs to be up 3. 1, 2, 3. We'll go back to this guy, and we'll do the exact same thing. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Now, that's great, except sometimes it doesn't look right. So we can see Cisne here. Let's use this as just a quick example. Highlight this and pretend like we're just now pasting it in here. So we'll line her up. Let's get this bar out of the way real quick. So you can see her foot here, about a box off of this blue line. Let's find which layer she is. Layer 12, perfect. So we'll move her foot down so it's about lined up with this. And we can even use this bar because it's off of the blue line. It can be kind of hard to tell. We'll use this bar and we'll see dead center at the bottom of her foot, right on line with this black bar. But in game, it does not look good. How do I know? So I've already done Cisne's sprite sheet. I've experimented and seen what it looks like. If she runs like this, the top of her head is just going to look like it bobs up and down. It does not look good. It looks like she's jumping while running. So as you can see with animation 1, 3, and 4, it actually looked better if I lined up the top of her head. So let's grab her again. And instead, we'll put the top of her hairline right on line with this black bar. That way I know for sure that this animation is going to look smooth. Now she's also off center. But I can see over here, I've kind of opted to line up her tie right there. Or maybe even, I probably even maybe used her leg because it's so straight. See about a pixel off. So let's use her leg as a guideline for her middle. Right about there. And that will be, now you can be a pixel or two off and things will still look smooth just because of the way the game's going to run. But this will get you very close where you want to be. Now, shadows. How do we do shadows? Let's see how far back Photoshop will let me go. Like her to be all part of layer 10. Perfect. All right, so let's get rid of these guys because we don't need them now. And remember, we've got her lined up, so I don't need this bar either. Zoom out a little bit. We want to make sure we're on the correct layer. She is run down, and we'll just turn this layer off for now. That's actually my shadow layer. And here I can show you, let's just show real quick what it looks like. So you can barely see a faintness here, but that's because the opacity is so far down. 15% is actually a good shadow opacity for RPG Maker, at least what we're using. So as I turn up the opacity, now you can see it's actually just a really dark black shadow. And it might look okay here, but in the game, not so good. So we'll turn off the shadow because we're going to create our own right now. So make sure you're on the frames you need. I want the rundown animation. Right about there. And let's turn off these lines because I don't need them. So we'll click the magic wand again. I hope that's what it's called. Magic wand, look at that. And we just click wherever. So now we've highlighted everything that's transparent and nothing that has any kind of color to it. So I want to invert that selection. So Control-Shift-I. Now I'm highlighting all of Cisne's animation frames. Now that I've highlighted them, I want to do Control-C, Control-V. Now I've made an extra one. I've got layer 12 here. So if I turn down, let's do, first what we'll do is verify that we're dead center. Let's zoom in a little bit. So as I'm turning this viewing off and on, you can see nothing now, but if I turn these on, visually, they're the same. So as I turn it off and on, nothing's moving, which is perfect. So run down is the sprite, the colored sprite animation I want. Layer 12 is going to be my shadow layer. Zoom out just so we can see it again. We'll magic wand, and we're going to select the inverse again. So we've selected transparent, hold Control-Shift-I. Now we've selected all the sprites. Now I'll go to my pencil tool, make sure we're black, and I'm just going to color them. I'm just going to fill them all in. We'll even do that one. Why not? Now, let's change the opacity to about 50% so we can see it, but it's not overwhelming. You can see she just looks darker because this layer, the shadow layer, is on top of this layer. So I want to move it underneath. That way it's behind that other layer. From here, we actually want to go to Edit, Transform, and Scale. Now, from my experimenting, the best transformation height, I believe, was around 40%, but that can change just depending on the animation. So we'll set the height up here, 40%. Now it's smaller. Let's zoom in so you can see it a little better. We need to apply it first. Apply the transformation. You can see right there, there's her arm. I don't think this is really a good location. I think the shadow is too far back. So we can click our move tool and just hit down. And I think something like that will look a lot better. It seems more centered under her with this isometric view we have. So this isometric view kind of is projecting onto her front. It's kind of projecting the shadow back behind her. So you'll always want to keep it not quite underneath, but back. You also need to watch places like here, like this foot. So don't just look at your longest one, because maybe this looks correct for here. But when we look over here, now the shadow looks like it's in front of her. That just doesn't make any sense. So let's instead put it under that back foot, and it still looks good. It still looks like it works just right. Now remember, 45 is good for adjusting and get everything fine-tuned where it's going to look good in game. 45% is going to be too high. So we'll set it to 15%. Bam. Now all you would do is save this image, put it in game, you'll have shadows on your characters. Thanks, guys.